My next Patreon question is from Benjamin, who wanted to know, do you think there'll be a major animation studio on the east coast of the United States like Blue Sky Studios? Throughout the history of animation, quite a number of studios have set up shop on the east coast, but some of them have not ended up staying open for various reasons. Winsor McCay, one of the earliest animation pioneers, worked on its films in New York, including Gertie the Dinosaur. Disney's biggest animation competitor in the 1930s, the Fleischer Brothers, were also based in New York. That even played a role in the look of the urban environment seen in the Betty Boop and Popeye cartoons they produced. That allowed the Fleischers to stand out from Disney and helped carve their own identity. When they decided to move their studio elsewhere in 1938, they chose Miami, Florida rather than Hollywood, thus keeping the operations on the East Coast. Following the Fleischers no longer being on speaking terms of each other and the box office failure of their second feature film, Mr. Bug Goes to Town, Paramount took full control of the studio and renamed it Famous Studios. However, it remained in Miami for a few years before returning to New York and staying there until Paramount shut down Famous at the end of 1967. For the most part, several of the major animation studios have been in California, Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, Nickelodeon, and Warner Brothers being some of the most well-known. That is where a lot of the American film industry is based and where several artists migrate to if they want to enter animation. But there really should be more options. It's strange that New York, which continues to have a thriving television and theater industry, is lacking an animation studio akin to the Fleischers. The closest I can think of is Nickelodeon's satellite animation studio in the city, which primarily works on preschool shows like Dora the Explorer. Blue Sky did have its main studio in New York, where they made films like Ice Age and Robots. While they were finishing up Ice Age, Dawn of the Dinosaurs, they moved to a new place in Connecticut, which still kept them on the East Coast. That was one of several reasons Disney closing the studio was so upsetting. Here was a place where artists and animators living in that part of the country could go to without requiring them to move to California. This is not even the first East Coast animation studio Disney has closed. The Disney Hollywood Studios theme park in Orlando had one of the satellite studios for Walt Disney Animation. It served as both a studio and an attraction where the guests could see the animators at work. I even remember going to that when The Hunchback of Notre Dame was in production, and it was a neat experience. The Florida studio would later produce Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear before shutting down after Disney elected to move to computer-animated features. Even during that brief period when hand-drawn animation was revived at Disney, it stayed primarily just an attraction with drawing guides and promotions for upcoming animated films. The magic of Disney Animation, as it was called, closed completely in 2015 to make way for a Star Wars attraction. For a while I thought it would be neat if they reopened the Florida studio to maybe make hand-drawn animated films based on the classic Disney afternoon shows or featuring Mickey Mouse and the gang, but that's obviously a long shot. Instead, they've opened a new animation studio in Vancouver, which is currently at work on a Moana series for Disney+. An animation studio based in Louisiana that had a lot of promise was Moonbot Studios. It produced William Joyce and Brandon Oldenburg's Oscar-winning short, The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore. Unfortunately, it shut down in 2017. It's sad that there's a lack of a major animation studio on the East Coast in the United States. One of the closest I can think of in the middle part of the country is ReelFX in Texas. They produced Freebirds and The Book of Life, and also worked on the animation for Scoob, Back to the Outback, and other animated films. It feels like most Hollywood studios would prefer to have the animation closer to, well, Hollywood. And because of the expense of opening up a new animation building, they're more likely to outsource the animation to an already existing studio. When Illumination started, for example, the French studio MacGuff was contracted to do the animation for Despicable Me before eventually being acquired by Illumination entirely. Although when Skydance Animation began work on the animation for their first feature Luck, they opened a studio in Connecticut and hired a number of former Blue Sky animators. So maybe one day someone will start a new major animation studio on the East Coast. That would be nice to see. Thank you for your question, Benjamin.